I've always been drawn to the mystery of abandoned places. There was a time when I had the idea of entering these properties and creating a channel where I could showcase my explorations. So, I always carried my camera with me on all my visits to document my adventures. Once, I found a very old and dilapidated house in the middle of nowhere, and it immediately caught my attention. I could imagine all kinds of forgotten stories. I couldn't resist the curiosity, so one night I packed my things and decided to go in. The place was a real mess. The air felt thick. There was something very unsettling about the house, a feeling of decay and abandonment. All the furniture was covered in dust. The ceilings and walls were infested with cobwebs. There were so many that they seemed to be part of the decoration. The broken windows filled with vines cast terrifying shadows into the room. It seemed like this place had stopped in time after something really terrifying happened there. Everything was very dark. I was shining my flashlight, but still I couldn't see very well. I was exploring the house when I stumbled upon something. I looked down. It was a box full of old newspapers, magazines, and other disused items. Among all that, I found an old digital camera covered in dust and mold. I was excited to think that this could reveal the secrets of the house if it had photos inside. I had my photography equipment, batteries, charging cables, and wireless chargers in my backpack. I found everything I needed to bring that camera back to life, hoping it still worked. Surprisingly, the camera turned on without any problems. Despite being nervous about the whole situation, I was glad for a moment to discover that it had stored images, but they weren't what I expected. They were all photos of the interior of the house. Many of them were blurry images, others were moving images, as if they had taken the capture while moving the camera. It seemed like they were trying to capture something they couldn't see. Among all those photos, I found some very disturbing ones showing silhouettes, shadows, ghostly figures, or blurry faces that looked twisted. In the clearest photo, you could see the silhouette of a man standing in a doorway. Only he didn't seem human. He had deformed proportions. His face was dark, his eyes hollow and lifeless. Thinking that someone captured this image inside the house where I was really scared me a lot. The photo that followed the previous one was the last one stored in the camera. It seemed to show that same man. But he was closer, looking at the camera and out of focus. I didn't want to speculate, but I could imagine that it was the last photo the photographer took before being attacked by that presence, as if with his last effort, he had wanted to leave proof of who ended his life. At that moment, I had the impression that the whole house was filled with a creepy atmosphere. The air became colder, and it seemed like there were whispers bouncing off the walls. The shadows cast by the dim light from outside seemed to grow and move. A shiver ran down my spine, and a horrible feeling of being watched came over me. I wanted to finish my exploration at that moment and go back home, but unfortunately, a snowstorm broke out and prevented me from returning. I was trapped inside at the worst moment. I didn't want to stay there because, honestly, I was really scared. But I had no choice. I had to wait for the storm to end, which at that moment seemed like it would last all night. I decided to try to sleep, thinking that I would wake up early to return. I gathered some cushions and settled into a corner of the room near a window. I positioned my camera to record myself sleeping in case something happened. I had the feeling it was going to be a difficult night. I was really tired, so I fell asleep until in the middle of the night I woke up to the sound of someone tapping on the window. For some reason, I couldn't move my body, but I looked at the window and saw a face. The most terrifying face I've ever seen in my life. It was the same face as the digital camera I found. It was the same man. He seemed to be a person, but his eyes were large black cavities, just like in the photos. He turned his head from right to left and smiled at me, with both hands resting on my window. He had quite long black nails, and they clicked against the glass every time he moved. He tilted his head, and I heard the sound of bones crunching. Everything about him scared me, but that inhuman smile terrified me to the point of wanting to scream, wanting to run, but I couldn't move. All my efforts were in vain. I was trying to make myself believe that this wasn't happening, that it was just the product of my imagination, an illusion, but it looked very real. It was more vivid than any of my sleep paralysis hallucinations. I felt awake, aware. Suddenly, in an instant, he disappeared from the window. I felt relieved thinking that it would all be over in a minute, and I would return to normal. But only a few seconds passed when I heard sounds from outside. I felt completely terrified again. I began to imagine the worst things. I looked at the door. It was slightly open. I shivered when I saw it opening inch by inch until a face peeked from outside. It was the same man. Whatever it was, I can swear to this day that it wasn't human. He began to walk towards my makeshift bed, slowly. I felt like my death was approaching with every passing second. He stopped right in front of me. I closed my eyes and prayed for this sleep paralysis to end and everything to return to normal. The next minute, I found that I could move my muscles again. I opened my eyes and got up from my bed cautiously. I looked around. That thing was gone. I wondered if it had just been a sleep paralysis hallucination after all. I quickly checked the camera. I saw myself with my eyes wide open, looking at something at the door, trying to move, but no one else appeared in the video. The storm had ended, so I packed my things to leave. But just then, I saw that the floor under my bed was wet. I could see they were footprints. I followed the footprints with my eyes and saw that they followed the path that creature made to the door, which was still slightly open. It took me a while to gather the courage to leave. To this day, I can't say if that was real or just a product of sleep paralysis. But what I am sure of is that I don't want to go through something like that again. That's why, without hesitation, I abandoned the idea of doing those explorations immediately and never tried anything like that again.
When I was 16 years old, I lived in a small village surrounded by nature and a large forest. My friends Chris, Jim, Tina, and I had just started a new hobby. We documented everything with our digital cameras while having adventures, trying new things, and discovering unexplored places. This led us to gain some fame within the village. We were on summer vacation and had nothing to do, so we decided to embark on a little adventure that I thought would be best to document. In the back of our village, near the forest, there was an abandoned school rumored to be haunted. Nobody goes there, nor is it even talked about. They say something bad happened at that school, but whenever we asked anyone about it, nobody really said anything and simply told us to stay away. We wanted to do some exploration, so we didn't listen to anyone and decided to go anyway. It was Saturday night. Jim, Chris, Tina, and I met at my house. We grabbed our backpacks and left without anyone knowing. After a 20-minute walk, we arrived at the school. The walls were dirty and covered with cobwebs. It was obvious that nobody had been there for a long time. We took out our flashlights and went inside. There were classrooms with desks and chairs. Everything was messy, but seemingly like a normal school. We explored for a while, and nothing paranormal or spooky really happened. I thought the villagers had made everything up just to keep us away from that place. As we were about to leave, Tina stopped us and pointed towards some stairs that apparently lead to the basement. I suggested to them that we shouldn't go any further because it was getting very late, but they were all excited and insisted on continuing. It was already midnight, but I agreed. We went down the stairs. The area we entered looked more like a basement, like a storage room where they kept broken desks, chairs in poor condition, and many other unused items. I saw a door behind some stacked tables and chairs. We all moved the furniture and were surprised to find that the door wasn't locked, nor did it even have a doorknob. It made us wonder if all those furniture were intentionally placed there to hide what was inside. We opened the door and entered a dark room. We all had our flashlights and started to explore. For some reason, it was colder than usual inside that room. I looked around while recording everything. It was very strange to have a secret room in a school. Inside the room, we noticed some things hanging from the ceiling. I will never be able to get that image out of my head. They were dolls of little children, some without legs or arms. Each one had a red string tied around their neck, hanging from the ceiling. They all had tags with a name written on them. I read some of the names before feeling really bad and even nauseous. I wanted to get out of there as soon as possible. Jim pointed out towards an old book that was in the center of the room. On the floor, there was a peculiar symbol resembling a star enclosed in a circle, marked with the same red strings. And as if that wasn't enough, there were black candles placed at each corner of the star. The book was carefully placed in the center of that arrangement. We knew it wasn't a good idea, but we stepped inside the circle and opened the book. We couldn't understand anything written inside. It was some kind of strange language we had never seen before, which made everything even more mysterious. There were some very unsettling pictures in that book, which made us feel very uncomfortable. At that moment, we all agreed to stop recording and just get out of there. Something felt wrong in that place. The vibes, the atmosphere, those dolls, the strange symbol. We didn't want to get into trouble, so we decided to leave everything as it was, not touch anything, and not take anything with us. Deep down, we were all scared. We headed straight home, and we all agreed not to tell anyone about our visit to that abandoned school. When I got home and was about to change my clothes, I noticed that a red string was stuck in my shoe. I tried not to think too much about it, but I can't ignore the fact that we wanted to leave everything as it was and not take anything from that place. But inadvertently, I moved things. During the following weeks, I couldn't shake off a strange feeling that something had followed me home, or that I had upset someone by entering that room and moving one of those red strings from some strange ritual that I wanted to forget.
Subscribe to the channel to hear the strangest stories of encounters with the unknown. I'll tell you the best tales of horror, mystery, and suspense. When whispers and shadows lurk in the darkness, the time for nightmares has come.
This happened last year when we were doing a project for making a TV commercial. The format of the commercial required an abandoned location, so after considering different possibilities of where we could shoot it, we found an abandoned hospital, which used to be a mental asylum. The hospital had long hallways, creaky doors, and it seemed to have many stories to tell. That made it a perfect place to shoot the commercial. I, along with my friends Mike and James, went to explore the place along with our recording equipment. When we first arrived, I felt something strange in the air, but I thought it must be because it had been abandoned for a long time. Even though it was daytime, the hospital felt very dark, and as creepy as it might seem, nothing strange happened to scare us. All we could hear were the echoes of our footsteps as we walked through the hallways. We took many photos and videos necessary for the commercial. By around 11 p.m., Mike and James were on the first floor shooting the last scene of the day. I went upstairs to get some additional shots to see if I could capture something interesting. I was filming from my camera when I heard a loud bang coming from the end of the hallway. It was dark, so I tried to ignore it, but I couldn't, and I felt very curious, so I walked slowly towards it. Suddenly, I thought I saw a dark shadow standing at the end of the hallway. I ran downstairs. I didn't tell Mike and James about the incident. We finished our work there and left. The next day, when we were back in the office, we reviewed the footage from the hospital and noticed something very strange. In one of the shots of one of the hallways, we could hear children laughing, followed by the sound of little feet running. All three of us looked very surprised. We were sure that there were no children in that place, yet we clearly heard laughter and footsteps in that recording that we didn't hear the day before when we were shooting. We were even more surprised when we found out that this video was recorded in the children's pavilion of the hospital. The laughter and the tiny footsteps scared all of us and made us very curious. That same day, we had to go back at night to finish the recordings, so we decided that it would be a good time to investigate more about what had happened. When we arrived, we walked through the hallways, which for some reason felt very cold. We were all nervous and had that horrible feeling of being watched from the shadows. Mike suggested that we split up to cover the area faster. I knew it wasn't the best option, but I ended up agreeing. I went to explore the children's pavilion, where we recorded the video with mysterious laughter. In the hallway, there were several rooms, some without doors, and others were locked from the inside. There was one room with the door slightly open, and it caught my attention the most. Slowly, I pushed the door. It creaked like an old and rusty swing in the wind. Inside the room, I saw a bunch of toys on shelves and on the floor, and many broken cribs. As I explored from inside, I heard a loud noise, and the door to that room slammed shut. I turned around, but I didn't see anything. Suddenly, the room was filled with those mysterious giggles along with other whispers. I stopped without making any movement, trying to be alert to what might happen next. But everything calmed down for a moment. Suddenly, I heard those little footsteps from the video getting closer to me. I panicked and ran towards the door of the room. I tried to open it, but it wouldn't budge. It was stuck. At that moment, I tried to calm myself, thinking that even though they could be spirits, they were just children. The footsteps kept sounding around me, but they got heavier and heavier. The laughter returned, but this time it was becoming deeper and thicker as the room grew darker, and I could feel a large shadow growing closer to me. I tried to force the door open, hitting it and calling for my friends. By that time, I was terrified. Fortunately, the door opened and I ran out like I've never run in my life, feeling full of adrenaline. I ran to find Mike and James. I heard them standing outside the building and shouting at me to come outside as well. As I ran, I could feel myself moving slower and slower as the exit door moved away, and the children's laughter echoed in the hallways. It was truly like living a nightmare. I tried to ignore everything and ran until I got outside with Mike and James. We got into the car and drove away from the place immediately. We never went back, and we couldn't finish that project.